What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Waste World Podcast. I'm your host, Gage Edwards, here again with another session from WasteExpo 2025, just because we had to backlog some things over the holiday break. But after this episode, you'll be getting this, I think, on the 13th of January. You'll be getting new episodes. We have a few interviews lined up with some guests that are going to come on the show, so that will be fun and engaging. But for now, we're going to look back at WasteExpo 2025 from Las Vegas with a session titled C&D Recycling Landscape, the What's Now and What's Next. Now, this session was one of our more popular sessions, more attended sessions at WasteExpo. The room was packed full of people ready to hear what's going on in the C&D recycling scope. I know it's a conversation or a topic that doesn't get talked about too much, but we're happy to shine a light on it because it is an important part of our waste stream and our industry. Look, construction and demolition materials, they, like I said, they represent one of the largest and most complex waste streams in the world. Without, factoring in natural disasters, the construction industry generates enormous volumes of material that challenge recyclers, landfill operators, policymakers, and sustainability leaders alike. It is a ton of tonnage, and it kind of goes overlooked. I feel like, the conversations I've had, the people who are in the space feel like their side of things goes overlooked, which is too bad. So in this session, a panel of industry experts came together to discuss where C&D recycling stands today and what's working, what's holding the industry back, what needs to happen next to improve recovery rates and resource efficiency. So from technology and operators to markets and regulation, the conversation offers a wide-angle view of the evolving C&D recycling landscape and something that you should really be keen to. So let's all get our ears open and listen to this podcast or this session from WasteExpo 2025. Before the jump, I would just remind you that our podcast is available on Spotify, Apple iTunes, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, other podcasting services. So make sure, wherever you're listening to it, that you're subscribing, you're sharing, you're leaving us a rating, leaving us a review, and just letting us know that we're doing a good job. Can't wait to be back with you in January with some fresh new content, some new interviews lined up. So those will be a fantastic addition to the Waste World Podcast catalog, and hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you.
Okay, hello and welcome. You are at the C&D Recycling Landscape session, What's Now and What's Next. My name is Terry Ward. I am the Executive Director of the CDRA, the Construction and Demolition Recycling Association. I'm excited to have a panel today from the CDRA, from my national association, which we'll talk about in a minute. I'll talk about who CDRA is, give you a quick brief national overview of how we see things in C&D recycling. I'll introduce our panelists. We'll have a brief technology overview from Viably, and then we're going to go into some hopefully interesting, thought-provoking questions for our panel, and then we'll go into Q&A. So with that, CDRA. CDRA is the established, we call it sorry, I can't walk away from the Mike, forgot about that. I like walking around. We are the established forum for C&D recycling. Our mission is to promote and defend the sustainable recovery and recycling of construction materials. We aim to provide the knowledge and best practices that drive our member businesses, and we are the only national association focused on C&D and have been around for over 30 years now. Our members primarily are core members are the recyclers, the material recovery facility owners and operators who make up the majority of this panel, in addition to our technology provider, Brandon, we'll introduce in a minute. But we also welcome and encourage all stakeholders that influence C&D recycling. So we welcome what we call our industry partners, the building products manufacturers and the construction materials suppliers, the general contractors, and of course all of the vendors and technology suppliers that help support us, and as well the public agencies who formulate policy that affects our members' businesses. We would rather have everybody at the table trying to solve the common problem than view any of these folks as outsiders. So with that, let's touch on C&D nationally. So we estimate 600 million tons a year of C&D material is generated annually in the US. They say, or estimates are, that 75% of that is diverted from landfill. You have to keep in mind that that's inclusive of things like concrete, asphalt pavement that tends to have its own source separated, often crushed and reused on site. We are still, despite that, landfilling almost 150 million tons a year of C&D, which is very similar to what we generate in landfill in municipal waste, MSW. One challenge we have in C&D is we estimate about half of the states in the US even or don't track, however you look at it, C&D figures. So it's very hard when someone says, what is the national recovery of C&D? How are we doing? It's a very difficult material stream to track, but we have contributed as CDRA. I think even the EPA uses some of the numbers that we helped fund and generate a study some years ago, and those that data has been extrapolated. But we have room to go. We estimate, and the folks that are here really are representing the mixed C&D recyclers, so it's all that leftover stuff that gets thrown in the roll-off box on a job site rather than source separated. And at that, we've got a ways to go. We estimate only about 27% of that mixed C&D fraction is actually being recovered for reuse. And here's what we're talking about, just for those of you. I'm sure this is really obvious to most of you, but you'd be surprised once in a while we get asked, so what is C&D anyway? So it is the construction and demolition debris that comes into our MRFs. There's some front end of MRFs. And then we're all about recovering the materials for reuse on the back end. So you see the metals, the wood, the aggregates, the concrete, and then some of the side lower volume materials, but things like carpet, OCC, plastics, all the other things that our members harvest out of the C&D stream. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists briefly, and then we'll come back and let them talk a little bit more. In order, well, we'll see if they're in order. I'm not sure how they sat. We have Terrell Garrett from Greenway Recycling, founder and CEO. And I'm going to go quickly because if I let these guys talk about themselves, we'll be here all day. So I'm showing you the slide. I just want to orient you to who they are. So when I ask the questions a little bit later, you'll have a little background on where they're coming from. So Terrell's operations, Greenway Recycling's out of Portland, Oregon. He operates a mixed C&D and dry commercial waste, I think is how you refer to it, in the Portland area. His facility is RCI certified, which is, I believe, the case with all three of our operators here, and we can come back later and talk about what RCI is if you're not familiar with it. His line capacity, design line capacity, is about 40 to 50 tons an hour, been in business 22 years, and is an award-winning facility, including last year's winner of our association's Recycler of the Year award. Next, two over, is Jeremy Renteria, Director of Strategic Accounts for Green Waste. And Green Waste is out of the Bay Area. Unlike Terrell's site, you can see that Site 1, Site 2 on the left. Green Waste is blessed with a very large facility, very impressive facility with multiple lines, which Jeremy can tell us about a little bit later. But in Northern California, nationally recognized, formerly known as Zanker, if any of you have been in and around C&D, now all under the Green Waste flag these days, but managing over 700,000 tons per year of C&D material, and with some leading what we call diversion or recovery rates, depending on how you look at it, close to 60% all the way up to 99%. They do run multiple lines, as I said, an advanced C&D line, a demolition-only line, mixed C&D lines, and a line for recovering materials out of bulky waste, actually, which is a little bit unique in our industry. And then, of course, multiple processing lines for wood and shingles and all the secondary functions that you can see at a recycling plant. And again, his lines are RCI certified. And then we have from LRS in the Midwest, we needed to mix it up a little bit and not just have the West Coast represented. So we invited Mark Molitor, VP of Post Collections for LRS, mainly out of the Chicagoland area, but they have also grown in recent years and are operating 4 C&D facilities. As I said, 3 in Chicagoland, 1 in Minneapolis. And each of those facilities processes around 700 tons a day and a total combined volume over 500,000 tons a year. So, and again, RCI certified facilities, 2 of those 4, and the other 2 are in process. So that's his background for our operators. And then at the very end, I'm going to invite Brandon Lapsis, the president of Viably, to come up and talk to us a little bit about what we're doing with C&D technology. And we hear this a lot. A lot of folks say, well, C&D technology is old, it's outdated, it's very low tech, it's manual sorting, it's all those things. And yes, there is some of that. But by and large, our members have invested substantially in various types of technologies, the infrastructure, the capital equipment required to process very high tonnage, as we've noted in these last few facilities, and in order to get these industry-leading recovery rates. So with that, let's have Brandon give us a little bit of overview, and then I'll come back and we'll chat with our panel.
Thank you, Terry. Good afternoon. Happy Cinco de Mayo for any of you celebrating today. I have not had my margarita yet. I will later. All of these folks here are customers that work with us, and they all process C&D a little differently. There's no one right way to process C&D. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the state of the industry. If you're new to C&D recycling and you've never built a plant, what does that look like? And then even if you've operated plants in the past, like all of these folks on the panel, they're all thinking about what does their next plant potentially look like as the commodities change, the market changes, legislation comes into place. Ultimately today, C&D recyclers require more innovation, automation, and scalability, especially for folks that are building their first plant or folks that are retrofitting a plant. They need it to be scalable to deal with different commodities as the waste stream in their market changes, as the end markets change, et cetera. A few challenges I want to talk about. One, protecting landfill space. If any of you attended part of the Investor Summit today or some of the other panels, more and more folks are focused on landfill space. There's roughly 800 to 900 landfills in the US. That's going to shrink even more in the next 5 to 10 years. So folks that are thinking about protecting landfill space are asking, what does my first plant look like? What are the commodities that I want to recover? Most typical commodities recovered in C&D are wood, metals, aggregates, some fiber, some OCC. What do the economics of a plant look like? We talk to folks about that all the time. How many sorters am I going to need? What's the capital investment? What's the infrastructure around the actual plant look like? What can I recover? What can I recycle? I just rattled off kind of the top 4 commodities that folks are targeting in the C&D stream, but there are folks that take in construction and demolition waste that recover a lot of unique commodities, whether it be vinyl siding, whether it be fiber, whether it be textiles. So there's more and more folks in different parts of the country that are looking at how do they divert more of the materials that come into their plant. Scalable plants. Folks that have plants today, they want to have the ability to scale them. We're talking to a lot of customers about a phased approach when they build plants. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Phase 1 for someone that's never built a C&D plant and may have it on a working face of a landfill, they may just want to go after the low-hanging fruit commodities and understand what the local market looks like for the commodities they can capture. And phase 2 may be a more advanced plant where they're starting to treat C&D fines, where they're starting to incorporate optical sorting, incorporate additional mechanical separation. And the market is evolving. So how do you plan for the market today and the market 5 years from now if new legislation is going to be introduced, if there's new mandates and regulations in your market? And 3, automation. We all know that there's constant labor challenges in this industry. A lot of folks are trying to find ways to pivot labor to be more value add with the support of mechanical separation, automation, whether it be optical sorting, whether it be scanning or sensor technology. Terrell asked me a few weeks ago on a phone call we had, how do I get gypsum? Is there technology out there that'll get gypsum out of my plant? A lot of people, for example, source separate gypsum on the front end, but there's a lot of plants that still have gypsum that comes in the front end. There is technology. There's a couple companies out there that actually their AI technology can identify certain types of gypsum. And with that progress in automation and AI, you're going to start to see more commodities being able to be captured. So 3 major buckets I want to talk about for a second. So fines treatment. Fines is historically a bad word in the C&D space. C&D fines, depending on what plant you're at, can be a 1/2 inch minus, they can be a 2 inch minus, a 4 inch minus. A lot of landfills do not want C&D fines. There's a lot of landfills and or states that no longer actually allow them. And that's especially if they have gypsum or other materials in them that cause disruption within the landfill. So you're seeing a lot of C&D operators that have plants that are now actually trying to find ways to treat C&D fines at multiple steps, maybe not just screening out initially a 1 inch, 2 inch minus, but then taking that and ultimately turn it into a sellable commodity through additional treatment. Improving recovery. A lot of plants have wide recovery ranges. Terry had that on the slides when she was featuring green waste, that their recovery is 50 to up to 99%. Recovery rate is important to understand in your local geography, because different geographies, different states classify certain parts of the waste stream as recovered versus not. But ultimately what we're seeing, or another trend we're seeing, is improved recovery, because there are a lot of commodities that can be pulled out of the C&D waste stream. The first bullet point on here is the cement industry. The cement industry is actively looking at starting to introduce fuel, SRF or RDF, from C&D. It's been done in Europe for many years. I think a good indicator of that is at our C&D World show in Dallas in March, 3 of the 4 largest cement producers were represented there and actively engaging with the market around preparing waste for fuel that can be introduced into one of their plants. And ultimately, end markets. That's something that we talk about a lot in the C&D space. Everyone is looking for more end markets. Shameless plug, if you aren't familiar with the CDRA, you should reach out to any one of us here. We're all members. A couple of us are board members. There's a great committee that focuses on end markets, and I've been in the industry for 20 years. I'm learning something on every one of those calls, and people that are doing different things with their commodities in different parts of the country. And then ultimately, compact plants. That's another concept or another theme that we're seeing in the industry. Civil infrastructure, land, buildings, all of it is more expensive today than ever. So a lot of folks that we work with, they want to build plants in a compact manner that maximizes their tipping floor space and also minimizes the amount of civil infrastructure that they need to potentially put around the plant to ultimately process the waste stream. As Terry said earlier, my name's Brandon. I'm with Viably. We're Denver, Colorado based. We're a solution provider, not just in the C&D industry, but for the organics and the MSW, really the solid waste industry. We partnered with a great company out of Ireland called Termec. They've been building sophisticated waste treatment plants for 25 years on multiple continents. We actually are building our first plant together later this year in just outside of Cleveland, Ohio. It'll be a heavily automated 150,000 ton a year C&D plant where we're going to target 80 to 85% recovery with that customer, and it'll have a lot of different technologies. I mentioned earlier, there isn't just one way to process C&D. You have folks that shred, screen, use ballistic separation, use trommels, disc screens. There's really any type of technology on the market at some point has been tried in C&D recycling. So we're constantly looking for what's next, what's new, what is the right solution set for educating the industry and helping customers. Ultimately, final thoughts here, when it comes to technology and just the future of the industry, people are really looking at, when I make an investment in a plant, how do I future-proof it? How do I deal with the waste stream changing? How do I deal with the commodities that potentially may have an end market today that may not have an end market tomorrow? And, what does that plant look like down the road if it needs to be scalable, if it needs to be phased? I know there'll be a Q&A session. I try to keep it very high level in terms of a little bit about the industry and some of the challenges. So I'll turn it back to Terry to get into the panel. Thanks.
Thanks, Brandon. That was a great overview. All right, now we're going to I get to direct my fun questions to our panelists and see if they behave. Never know what's going to come up. All right. So Brandon talked a bit about technology, and again, let's see where this goes, because we can adapt a little bit here. I am curious if Tara, let's start with you. What would you say for the audience in your plant? Give us a sense on a sliding scale how much you rely on manual labor versus automation, and sort of how have you incorporated automation into your operation?
You stumped me.
You're at a loss for words. Do you want me to rephrase that? So
with automation, our people are turning from just laborers into specialists, enabling the people to earn higher wages, to produce more. That's the goal I have with my people and my plant.
So maybe you can help explain, and I should have backed up a little bit. When I think of your plant, and I've seen it, so I'm thinking of this in the back of my mind. I think some folks think C&D Recycling is all manual pick, 20 people down a sort line, 10 either side, just positively sorting everything. Give us a sense for your plant and how it and pieces of machinery. Are you doing all positive sort? Are you doing negative sort? Give us just a little sense.
Well, Brandon was talking about all these different machines available. We pre-shred to a 9-inch by 42-inch minus product, go through a ballistic separator, flip flow screens, finger screens, air separation, magnets, and water bath, and then my crew. And I want next to move into optical sorting. So I think we have 11 or 12 machines and 29 conveyors.
So fairly automated, and
Yes.
thank you. And it would be hard pressed to say, a lot of times in C&D we talk about an A and B line, A line being your positive sort, B line being your screenings. How many lines would you say you have? Do you have an A and B line, or do you have A, B, C, D, E, F?
I have a fines line. I have a 2-dimensional line, and I have a 3-dimensional line that I want to split into 2 lines.
Okay. Thanks for that. Gives us a pretty good sense. Now I'm going to go to Mark. Could you just give us an overview how you approach your C&D plants, the 4 various ones? I imagine there's some differences, but generally speaking, mostly reliant on manual sorting or to highly automated?
Yeah, we're on the flip side of that. We're mostly. Can you hear me? There we go. We're on the flip side of that one. We're mostly hand sorting. We screen out the ADCs. Those will run through a magnet. We have a little bit of air separation at one of our sites, but yeah, we rely heavily on manual separation.
And Jeremy, would you like to fill us in from the green waste perspective?
I'll keep it relatively short, but from the image you saw up there earlier, at least our Bay Area facility, we're talking about 6 different sites 3 in the Bay Area, or 4 in the Bay Area now, with 2 additional ones reaching out to the Sacramento and Stockton area. So if you're familiar with California, fairly regional. Our sites in the Bay Area are on 2 sites that are 70 plus acres. And on each site, we have 6 different processing lines. And some are source separated processing lines, while others are commingled. And so it's very big. And in regards to your question, as far as, technology or hand sorting, we're commingling them, just like the material, fairly seamlessly. And the lifeblood of our company is our team. And whether it's being hand sorted, we have a series of trommel screens, ballistic separators, knee hot air separators, to try to move the material as easily as possible before it gets to our team members. And then our team members are able to at least separate it fairly quickly on any given line that they're on. And our team members are able to move across our 6 various lines in our Bay Area facility. So one team member is not supposed to just work on the wood grinding operation line or the demo line or the advanced C&D line. So it's fairly comprehensive. It's quite big on 2 70-plus acre sites in the Bay Area. Our other sites are relatively small in comparison, but a lot of team members on each line, not necessarily just technology or machinery.
Appreciate that. So I want to keep on the theme a little bit, switching to operations. If each of you could give a sense, if you were to step back and say, I had a successful day of operations today, what's most important to you? Do you look at the recovery rate? Do you look at throughput? Do you look at some other kind of efficiency rating? It's not the same for every plant. In other words, what makes or breaks your business from how you operate?
Nobody got hurt.
Good answer.
In addition to that, I know a lot of facilities in the country have experienced significant declines. Portland, Oregon has the highest office vacancy rate in the nation. We're down to 4 cranes citywide. Last year, they permitted 500 apartment units in a city of 650,000. It's rough. The only way we're going to get through this is by recovery. So I can't really measure recovery daily, but I measure it weekly. And my recovery rate is so tied to my bottom line. And, and it like he was saying, it's back to the guys. I mean, if they're joking around in the lunchroom, then things are going well. It's a good day.
Yep. Fair enough. Mark?
Yeah, of course, safety is number one, but we measure it based on throughput and diversion. And if you send too much through the line, your diversion goes down. If you don't put enough on the line, your diversion goes up, but then you lose your labor. So we can gauge this every day. We do manual reports so we can understand our diversion, and we can make the adjustments the next day or same day.
For us at Green Waste, outside of safety, which is number one, as everyone's mentioned on the panel, each line that we have has its own throughput. It also has its own recovery rate certified through RCI. But what measures success for us is, did the material that come in actually get turned into a different product in which we can sell on the outbound, right? So it's the round robin effect. If a customer drops off a load of commingled material, but then that truck is empty and drives over to our materials yard, we've turned the material into something else, does that truck leave empty, or does it pick up material and go back to the job site and dump it again, right? So then now you're stopping the carbon footprint. People are choosing to go to our site versus maybe a competitor that may be closer because we're offering a product at the end of it. So trying to keep everything in one house as possible. And we're able to do that by the benefit of having, various lines that turn wood into mulch or concrete into aggregate, or the gypsum into process fines. And we're able to extract some of the organics and then send it down to our composting facility as well. So we measure success from, we get the material, turned into something else. We're able to viably sell it as a product on the outbound.
Great perspective. Thanks, Jeremy. I'm curious, I want to come back to something you said, Terrell, about volumes being down, and I know there's, some concerns about the economy and kind of where we're headed with construction. I just wanted to hear from the other two of you. Mark, are you also seeing volumes down in the Midwest and the Chicagoland area?
Yeah, for the last couple of years, volumes have been coming down, and every year we hear they're coming back, and have yet to see that.
Jeremy, in the Bay Area?
Yeah, volumes are down in general, but one thing that we noticed in our area, in the Bay Area, and fortunately and unfortunately, working in California, a lot of material, a lot of regulation, a lot of bureaucracy. We've actually had a steady market share in regards to the reports that we can see from Cal Recycle and the surrounding jurisdictions. So even though the numbers are down, market share is still relatively the same, which is a good indication that business hasn't really necessarily left, but maybe business has slowed down from the commercial contractor and construction industry.
So with that in mind, I'm curious, and I'm going to aim this, I think, mainly at Mark and Terrell, if you guys don't mind, just knowing your positions. Given this not seeing volumes come up so much and high interest rates and a little uncertainty, generally speaking, how are you making decisions around investing in capital equipment or making changes to your line that would improve recovery, let's say, or improve throughput?
Yeah, I'd say right now we're taking a pause on that right now. We're going to continue doing what we're doing. We're going to continue to talk to the manufacturers, see what kind of opportunities there are to add technology. But, not only volume we're seeing a struggle with, but pricing. There's a lot of competition in the area. So if you've got to bring the volume in at floor pricing, it's also hard to add capital to your system.
Any investment we make will have to work with today's volumes, not those we predict tomorrow.
So last point on technology, I'm very curious about what you would say. If technology could solve one problem in your plant, you can wave a magic wand, what would technology? I know we've got some technology suppliers out here, so this is really to help you all out. We need to keep pushing solutions and innovations. What would that be? What would be next for you?
Drywall versus wood, they're the same color, they're the same density. If I could reliably get that drywall out of the wood, it would be a complete game changer. And I could probably increase my recovery rates 7, 8, 9%.
Hear that? Any optical suppliers out here, technology providers, AI? Can you do it? I figured we'd hear yes.
Proof's in the pudding.
I was going to say, we're all looking forward to that. So be on notice. We're all looking for it. Mark, anything from your point of view?
No, nothing to add on that one.
Okay, fair enough. Brandon, what about you? You're a system provider and you're out there talking to folks. What's the biggest problem you're hearing?
Yeah, drywall is one. I think fines treatment. There's a lot of people that have been treating fines in their existing plant for some time, but they're really trying to do it to the next level. Like I was talking a little bit about in the slides that I covered, some people are, Jeremy's organization makes a few different products from their fines, but there's still a certain level of contamination. And like I mentioned, the panel, the end markets committee, there's some folks in the Northeast, I know, for example, that are doing some different things that I had never heard of with fines. So that would be my answer.
Thanks, appreciate that. Yeah, I know in our world, we just got done with our C&D world here about a month ago, and quite a lot of energy around wash plants. And I don't know how many of you know that term, but basically a wet process to clean up the aggregates and increase the value of those recovered aggregates that we pull out of the stream. And I think you'll probably see more of that. All right, let's switch. I want to talk a little bit about end markets. I'm sure it's a little bit different depending on what part of the country you're in and so forth. But I'm curious if I guess what's sticking out to you as, let's say, your biggest challenge from an end markets perspective. Terrell, do you want to go first, or I'm always picking on you first? We can start. Why don't we start with Jeremy?
What we have attempted to do was at every one of our C&D sites, we have a landscape materials yard. And so having a landscape materials yard where our operations are located allows us to tell that story full circle fairly quickly. So whether you're a municipality wanting to look for organics for SB 1383, we'll have compost, we'll have mulches, we'll have aggregate construction material that for the job sites. So the landscape materials yard has actually really become a very good avenue for us to essentially advertise all of the recycling operations our plants are capable of doing. So that was really step one. And we went from a materials yard that housed maybe 30 products to now over 100, and a third of those are all recycled products as well. And the reason why I say that is we also have materials that are native. So if a project needs to pick up material that we don't necessarily produce, at least they're still able to get it through us. So that makes the end market fairly easy to achieve at our site. So that's probably the main thing we've done that was fairly unique in the area.
It's great that you're able to keep those markets local, and that's definitely one of the challenges in C&D, given the weight, the volume of materials. We really can't afford to truck it too far to find end markets. And I'm always amazed when I hear we've got members, for example, up in the Northeast that will travel, I think it's close to 8 hours by truck to get to an end market for their recovered wood. And there's just something fundamentally wrong with that when we're trying to, save the environment, but we've got to go that far, and the truck traffic and all that we're adding to that. So local end markets really are critical, and we always need help with that. Terrell, anything from?
We have declining markets with wood due to the slow but sure closure of paper mills that burn it for power and steam. In Oregon, we do not have a market for shingles. Instead, we truck them almost to Seattle. Just to your point made. Our biggest problem with our end markets is that our state environmental quality department does not act as a partner. We need to develop new markets, but our environmental quality, quote, partner is focused on finding out why we cannot do something and never says or works with us on how we can. It's almost as if we walk into the equation convicted. And because of that, you're not seeing innovation in our area.
Mark, has that been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, we were pretty successful on moving our end products up until this year. I think shingles really hit us as well. Prices for disposal doubled, if they would even take it at all. We've had to move out of the area up into Wisconsin. So that's a struggle that we're looking for an area of help on.
Just to add what Terrell said, one thing in regards to like the wood market, with all the innovation and the money that we invested in the team and our facilities, even if a market is shrinking, Green Waste has really pride itself on making sure the material that we do send out is of the highest quality possible. So even when markets are shrinking, we're still able to get that material out to some of the historic markets such as biomass. And historically, we're usually anywhere between 70% wood that's going into biomass, while 30% is going into our materials yards. And as I mentioned earlier, the materials yards are a vastly important ecosystem for us to get that material after we process it through our C&D lines, whether it's in Sacramento or in the Bay Area.
Having those superior end products like you're talking about, that's the reason I'm the only guy in my area that doesn't have a wood pile. Making the best product you can is our future. If you don't do that, you will not last.
Do you think, this may be the loaded question, do you think that our industry has sort of shot itself in the foot with not creating those higher value or better quality products? Do you think we've maybe damaged or jeopardized some of the end markets because of, historically, like biomass? And again, I've been out in the field before this role, in a technology role, and sometimes you see the wood pile and you see there's quite a bit of non-wood in there. Okay, well, where is this going? Well, we can get away with, they'll accept 15% deleterious material or what have you, so we make sure there's 15% in there. That kind of attitude still, I think, exists, and I'm curious if you think that's not necessarily helped our image, if you will, or if it's hurt some of the end markets. What do you think, Mark? Do you think that's the case?
Yeah, I would say so. If they can go somewhere else and get consistent material, whether it's reusable or virgin material, they'll go that way. Maybe they pay a little more, maybe they pay a little less, but yeah, for consistency, yeah, I think it's hurt us.
So I'm going to switch gears from anything else you guys want to say about end markets. I mean, I've got to imagine do we have some public agencies here that can help influence, innovation grants and help? Nobody wants to raise their hand. Well, in case they are here, yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to leave you out of that, Brandon.
One encouraging thing, end markets have been historically tough, and some are shrinking, but some are evolving. The building products manufacturers are really looking at this industry more than ever. They have very specific sustainability targets. They're striving for circular economy. They have specific mandates around what percentage of their new produced building products will have recycled content. And I think we've seen that in the last couple of years more than ever, just with some of those major manufacturers participating in the CDRA and sitting at the table and then actually visiting recyclers and understanding, well, what do you need to do to be able to pull this commodity out of the waste stream and get it to my manufacturing plant to produce new product?
It's a great point, Brandon. And some of the things that Brandon's referring to, I've been focused on mixed C&D, but we've got great examples in the gypsum wallboard space where we have the manufacturers of new board at the table and really looking at some of those closed loop solutions, as well as the shingle manufacturers that we just talked about. Obviously, those technologies to go full closed loop are still under development, still coming along. It will take some time, I think, before we'll really see full closed loop, but on the way, we'll find some value-added applications, I think, that will help with some of those things. So thank you for bringing that up, Brandon. It's a great point. Why don't we talk a little bit about recycling rates? And I know this is one of the issues that we struggle with as an industry of recyclers. The expectations around what's required through policy, regulation, lead projects, let's say, that set a threshold of a certain recovery rate. It's kind of a loaded question. I wonder if we could talk about that a little bit. In some market areas, it's more important than others. Jeremy, you're in the Bay Area, and you'll be actually, I think you're moderating a panel later this week on some of the policies, changes, and developments in the Bay Area. A lot of that centers around recycling rates. Would you be able to take just a minute and kind of talk to us about the Bay Area and what's transpiring there in terms of how important recovery rates are, how realistic are they? Where is that all heading? Can you give us a glimpse?
So once again, the California market's a little bit of a beast, but statewide, 65% is the magic number. Whether you're a facility, whether you're a hauler, whether you're a construction company trying to achieve that goal, whether it's for LEED, whether it's for sustainable sites, 65% has really been the magic number. But the distinction that needs to be made is that's for commingled material. It's fairly easy to reach high diversion rates when source separated material is coming into your facility. Wood, you're going to be in the 90s. But if wood comes in with, solar panels, metal, drywall, you have to make sure your plant is able to separate that material fairly easy to even achieve maybe 70% on a good day. One thing you want to mention when you talk about diversion rates is, especially when you talk about LEED, but also in San Jose in particular, where our biggest facility is located, you have rates with and without ADC. For those who may be new to the industry or those who don't know what ADC is, that's alternative daily cover. And When you have alternative daily cover, everyone's recycling rates are extremely high. Everyone's having a good day. But if you were to remove that from the equation, recycling rates drop anywhere from 20 to 30% on a given commodity or a given recycling line. So I do want to preface that saying that ADC is extremely important, especially in California and especially on a national stage when you're talking about the USGBC.
Yeah, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, it is excluded from recovery rates under LEED in many other jurisdictions as well. So obviously a little bit of conflict there. Terrell, talk to us, if you don't mind, about that, and maybe in the context of RCI, and explain to folks what RCI is, if you would.
Back in 2019, I was being asked by contractors to provide 75% recovery certifications for jobs for LEED purposes. My plant didn't do that. And rather than follow along, I found this outfit called Recycling Certification Institute. And what they are is they're a third-party certifier of recovery rates. They come in, they look at your operation, they talk with you, they develop a level of comfort, they go through your books. You get an audit, and they publish on the internet all the time your recovery rates. It's not very expensive, and the nice part about it is that I can just sit back and say, look it up online. It is what it is. And it's something that I think should be universal, especially in light of the number of companies out there that will just tell you what you want to hear. We have a local player that has wallpapered Portland with 90% recovery rates. Their facility has a 16% recovery rate. Okay? They also have, because of this, 85% of the public works projects. It has really messed our market up. To have consistency, transparency is critical. Also, you were talking about the recovery rates. In the Bay Area, they tend to just do solely C&D material. In Portland, we also do commercial and industrial waste from warehouses, manufacturing, etc. And that pulls our rates down. So for example, with ADC, I'm 76%, without 57%. Much lower than the Bay Area, but maybe considering what I'm bringing in, I may actually be higher.
Yeah, and I think those are very good recovery rates. I don't think that's anything to be ashamed of. And I think there are some cases where you see, you can tell a big difference in, coming back to Jeremy, I think one of the things, maybe this will come out a little bit in your presentation, it's a catch-22. If you do allow ADC, you're sometimes incentivizing the creation of it. And so you may see some recovery rates that are really down in that, 15, 20% without ADC, but lo and behold, you're at 80% with it. Something's sort of wrong there, because if you're just harvesting fines or collecting fines and generating ADC that way, you wouldn't see those kinds of numbers. So it kind of implies we're manufacturing ADC, which is not really what we want to.
Well, that's something that the CDRA is addressing right now in the End Markets Committee. What we're looking at is, ADC has gotten a bad name. Well, when you take 8-inch and smaller garbage and you put it on top of garbage, it's kind of garbage. I mean, come on, guys, Or when you grind up garbage and you put it on garbage, it's still garbage. But if you take a 1 or 1.5 inch minus screening that looks, feels, and acts like soil, is that not recovery? That's recycling to me, because it's replacing the use of a natural resource. And this is something that CDRA, again, is really working on. And I think that under certain circumstances and rules, ADC should be considered by the USGBC.
Just elaborate on that. ADC itself, in the beginning maybe was, can't beat them, join them. But at this point, if you're producing ADC and that material itself is not going to find an end market, as opposed to using organics as ADC, that is in fact a good thing. We're not mad if ADC is being counted or not counted toward a project, because there are projects where you can count ADC and diversion rates are going to be met depending on the jurisdictions you're in. At Green Waste, we just want to make sure that if we can recycle something, we sure will. And what gets turned into ADC at our plants are things that really don't have any end market, cannot be turned into anything else. So that byproduct itself is not necessarily bad. It's something that we are producing as a byproduct. But for certain projects, you can count ADC. So it's gotten a little better. And as long as we're not doing anything with organics, like we historically were doing in landfills, that's still a win.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Jeremy. Good point. So I want to leave a little time for Q&A, but I want to ask one more question. Again, I'm thinking of those who influence policy and regulation out here. If there's one thing that your local jurisdiction could do to help increase recovery, or I want to say help your business, but I'm just going to assume, let's call it, increase recovery. What could they do in what would be a good step? How could they help you most? Again, I like the magic wand principle. If you could get Metro Portland or DEQ, whoever's.
Is Metro in the crowd? I think there may be one. So,
Well, let's hear it.
I'm used to sticking my foot down my throat. So our regional government, Metro, which is our primary regulator, will not publish recovery rates. They refuse. They're not requiring RCI certification. And in fact, today, we have 0 requirements on recovery at our facilities in the Portland area. We need some kind of rules that, I call it a fog the mirror test, that you're actually in the game, but I don't think you can put a minimum so high that you force material out that would otherwise be recovered. So if we put in a 65% rate, I would have to stop taking commercial and industrial. So there's some magic way to do that, and I'm not sure, but if they would help us with this, it would make a massive difference.
Appreciate that. You guys want to add anything?
I would just say recycled content. I mean, we're recovering the materials. They've got to have a consistent outlet in order for us to keep doing our jobs.
Magic Wand would essentially having these jurisdiction municipalities really be team members. They put the onus on the facility to find the end market instead of mandating it in the specifications for projects. So one example I always like to bring up is we make 2 different base rock products from our concrete recycling. Because of our machinery and how long we've been doing it at Green Waste, we make a base rock plus versus a Department of Transportation Class 2 spec. The base rock plus tests gradation, R value, they're all essentially the same. But the look of it, you're going to see a little bit of wood, a little bit of brick, a little bit of porcelain. So you get that on any job site, and you're going to have the engineers looking at it and decide not to use it just specifically off of visual inspection. So if you're mandating products that you're requiring us to recycle as a facility, but also trying to make construction companies achieve those, it'd be really good if you mandated the use of it. We understand you don't want to put it on the watershed down a creek or something along those lines, but there could be uses, parking lots, the concrete jungle that we have in the Bay Area, you can find uses for it. So that would be really helpful.
Great. Well, if you're in the audience or you can influence policy or you are a policymaker, those are all great suggestions. Appreciate that, guys. With that, I want to open it up. Are there any questions? If anybody wants to come up and ask these guys a question, please come up to the mic. Anyone? Please.
I have a question around consolidation. I come from Europe. Take an example, the household waste market in France used to have around 200 sites 20 years ago. 20 years on, there's only 100 left, but much more automated, a lot more of the systems, I guess, that Viably is developing. Do you think something similar is going to happen to the construction and demolition industry, or is consolidation limited by the fact that the value per ton of material is perhaps a little lower, and so you still need a lot of decentralization to minimize transportation cost?
Can I help answer that question by saying the two of you sitting next to one another are cousins now? If you're wondering about consolidation in C&D, there's a good example at the table there. Yes, we see we see much of it.
Do you mean consolidation of ownership or consolidation of facilities?
There's fewer plants but larger plants instead of more small plants.
In our marketplace, the political powers that be are forcing even more decentralization, which will cause real problems with economies of scale.
Brandon, you want to add to that?
You're going to see both, in my opinion. You're going to see consolidation of certain players in major metropolitan areas, but then you're going to see people in areas where there hasn't traditionally been as much recycling start to put plants online. Again, landfill space is shrinking. It's going away. It's going to force more recovery. A simple example of that is I met someone at the C&D show in Dallas in March. His professional career, he's been a home builder his whole life. He's now in serious discussions with us about building a C&D plant because the landfill's far, it's more expensive, and he sees I'm throwing away 40 to 50% stuff that's a commodity that can go somewhere.
I'm not sure that isn't a common theme we've seen, over the years that I've been involved. A lot of you folks started out of necessity, whether it was a hauling company, again, with roll-offs needing a place to go, or, trying to get that extra margin when landfill rates go up. I think we've seen a lot of that from what I like to call the sort of fragmented mom and pops that used to be around 15, 20 years ago to obviously now, whether it's regulation, it's investment in equipment and machinery, we're seeing, some larger entities come in and we see some consolidation, and in part that is to help drive these investments and leverage the economies of scale you're talking about. So it is very important. Any other questions? Please.
Yeah, my name is Jason Fosio. I'm the Director of Public Works in Cochise County, Arizona. And my question is, we operate a landfill and we're trying to reduce what we're putting in the cells. What is the minimum amount of material before we would consider going to a separating plant to make it viable?
Good question. I mean, we're talking with folks now that have as little as 10,000 tons a year, or even less. It's kind of a loaded question because it depends on, again, what are the end markets near you? How far away are they? What are the top 5 commodities? What is the potential revenue tied to those commodities? We'll talk after. No, but in all fairness, the home builder I referenced, right? He has very, very small amounts of material, and he's going to start with a simple line that's roughly a $750,000 investment and a half a dozen folks sorting. I mean, that's how this industry was born. There's still people that are floor sorting, and they take in 400 tons a day, right? There you go, Richard.
Yeah, there's definitely more than one way to skin the cat. And I think having seen this over the years with, folks that are running a landfill, part of it is just starting somewhere and see what you have, because you don't really know until you start segregating it and understanding. So sometimes the kick sort, the floor sort isn't a bad way to start, or just a simple A line to get it up off the floor, and then make your investment from there.
Yeah, I just had a question I can do from here. Very curious how you put in a 2D, 3D separation along with the typical A and B lines. Talk about mechanical separation. How did you manage that to get 2D, 3D?
Talk to that guy.
So that's the principle of a ballistic separator, where you can separate 3-dimensional from 2-dimensional. But a lot of traditional C&D plants, the A line has, for lack of a better description, 2 to 3 feet of shit on it. And what you can't see, you can't sort, and you can't recover, which means you can't generate economic dollars.
So it's just a typical ballistic separator. Go into it a little bit.
Yeah, so in Terrell's plant, the principle is front-end shredding, and that feeds the ballistic separator directly. And then from there, he has the different fractions go to different sorting lines. And like you said, and you can expand on that, you want to take the 3D and split it again. One second before you comment on that, there's also plants like this plant that we're building and will go on later this year. It will go online later this year, has ballistic separation later in the plant for even more meticulous sorting and improved recovery ahead of optical sorting.
And I have plane tickets all ready to see it. As far as the ballistic separator, we were in Fort Worth at the Cow Horse World Championships. We drove down to Austin to look at robots. And we finished, we got in the rental car, and decided to have lunch. And then once we got on the road, my wife, Chris, and I would talk about it. And I looked at her and I said, well, she said, screw the robots, buy the Ballistor. She made the decision, I didn't.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend. There's a few plants that you can see a ballistic separator in. After many years of seeing the traditional A and B, the lines that Brandon's talking about, it's pretty impressive to see a line that, maybe was 40 to 50% wood now becomes 90% wood, and you actually have the opportunity to do a negative sort on wood. That's game changing from a labor standpoint, from a plant efficiency standpoint. So pretty incredible. It obviously it creates some different design challenges and space challenges and all that, but that's all workable. And I'm mindful of time. I want to make sure I'm making the shameless plug for CDRA. Again, these guys are all members there. Represent some of the best and brightest, but we've got all kinds there. We're here as an organization to lift everybody up and help educate, share the knowledge, give you plant tours. We have a number of really robust markets that are well led by industry experts that are on our board and just amongst our membership. So highly recommend it if you are interested in learning more about C&D or getting more involved. Please reach out to any of these guys or me. My information's here. Come talk to me afterwards, or booth 3515 downstairs. And with that, here is that magic QR code for you to leave your feedback if you'd like to do so. And I want to thank our panelists very much.
All right, that wraps up this episode of the Waste World Podcast, a session again from WasteExpo 2025 on the current state and future of construction and demolition recycling. Operational realities on the ground to broader markets and policy considerations. This was a discussion that highlighted both the challenges and opportunities facing the C&D recycling sector. So if you found this conversation engaging, if you found this conversation delightful, or if you just were entertained and want to hear more about the Waste World Podcast or hear more from us and from professionals in the industry, make sure you subscribe to the Waste World Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. I don't know if they still have something. They must have some kind of catalog. Our podcast host puts us everywhere. So wherever you're listening to podcasts, where you ever find them regularly, you'll be able to find ours there, as well as YouTube with our video component for the podcasts. So make sure you're subscribing, make sure you're sharing, leaving a review, leaving a rating, letting us know we did a good job, being engaged with the show, so that way we can offer more and more interviews to you, more and more awesome content to you. That's what we want to do. We want to share great stories from our industry. We want to share great insights from our industry and go over awesome innovations with you and bring the realest and freshest looks from the industry right to your beautiful ears, your listeners, as my grandfather called them. Oh, I got my listeners on. Put my ears in. So, again, make sure you check out more episodes of the Waste World Podcast. Make sure you visit waste360.com for more information from the waste and recycling industry with all of our articles, our galleries, our videos, everything to find there. And as always, it's our world. Let's not waste it. Thanks for listening.